For det betyder, at teltet er fyldt af nysgerrige, der gerne vil høre lidt om Zambia, og gerne vil høre lidt om det, der hedder Danmarks liberale demokratiprogram. Før jeg starter, vil jeg introducere både mig selv og mine kolleger her ved siden af. Først og fremmest vil jeg gerne introducere Elias Chipimo, der står ved siden af mig her, som er fra det parti i Zambia, som DNDP samarbejder med. Elias er i øvrigt også præsidentkandidat i Zambia. Mit eget navn er Bo Manderup. Jeg er formand for Danmarks liberale demokratiprogram. Det er således, at Elias taler ikke godt dansk, ligesom jeg taler ikke godt zambisk. Så derfor så slår jeg nu over i engelsk, og jeg håber, at det ikke er et problem for nogen af jer, der hører på. So, ladies and gentlemen, dear Elias, you are most welcome to the meeting at Bornholm, where you have been now for the last 24 hours, roaming around, familiarizing yourself with an expression of how Danish society and democracy works. I understand from you that it has been interesting, and as you said just a while ago, here we have all the seasons of the year in half an hour. Sunshine, rain, wind, and that is precisely what the Danish summertime is about. Now, Elias is here today as the representative of his party, a party which Elias himself started some years back in Zambia. Zambia is an emerging democracy where parties are obviously trying to establish themselves in order to gain sufficient support to establish and create a society which is a democratic society. Most of the countries in Africa are coming from a situation where democracy is in the making, and Zambia is no exception. The theme of our discussion today, and I will make that brief, is new and old democracies. The point I should like to make, Elias, is that democracy is something which you establish and work on. It's a constant work in progress. We have had, in the country you're visiting, 150 years of democracy. It has been 150 years of trial and error. In the very beginning of our own democracy back in the 19th century, we too had our struggles, and luckily our democracy has now matured, as most of the West European democracies have matured. But the point I want to make to you is, of course, that although looking at our way of handling the political process and the democracy, don't make the mistake, and I know you don't, of transposing one-to-one democracy from here to Africa and to Zambia. Democracy, as we know it, has as its basis a situation of trust. In particular, that once you're in government, you should always remember that you can be out of government. So you should ensure that the minority, the opposition, is treated as well as those who are in government. That system is one which we have established over many years. In the European Parliament, to draw a parallel to a situation and an institution where you have many different countries, many different cultures, parliamentary traditions, what they do there is an interesting thing, namely they ensure that regardless of your size, you are involved through a system of ensuring the distribution of positions in the governing structures, which ensure that you always have the minorities represented as well. And I think personally that is an interesting experience to look at, because it guarantees that whatever your size is, you're a part of what happens. So it's not the winner takes all scenario, because too often we have seen that if that is the case, there is a problem. So I won't do any more than that, just saying that we are very pleased in DLDP, which is the abbreviation of Danish Liberal Democracy Program, to cooperate with you. We have now had a project running for more than a year, and with very good results. And we have therefore extended this program into the next 3 years to ensure that we can, with you as partners, try and make it work for you, try to help you with the things you need in terms of youth politics, in terms of formulations of policies, dissemination of policies, communication, and hopefully we can be of help to you. We're looking forward, Elias, to listen to you and to what you want to tell us today. So, Elias, the floor is yours.
Thank you very, very much indeed for that kind introduction, and thank you to all of you for being ready to listen to a non-Danish presentation. I am very fortunate to be here thanks to the initiative of the Danish Liberal Democracy Program. And really what I want to do by way of starting is to try and define the point of departure in talking about democracy. And for me, democracy is really the bridge between two things, hope and fear. Democracy is the platform that provides that bridge. Hope is absolutely necessary. Hope and fear are both instincts that it doesn't matter where in the world you were born or what your circumstance is, but these are two instincts that we are all endowed with naturally as human beings. We need hope because hope allows us to make progress towards a future we would like to see. But you also, in a way, need fear, because fear ensures that you stay alive so that you actually experience that future. But it shouldn't be a fear that prevents us from being able to be effective at what our natural talents allow us to become. And that platform is democracy. Democracy is the bridge that moves us from fear to hope. And what's critical about that is that you have to have what we call the rule of law. Now, the rule of law is perhaps best explained in the oldest story that's known to man. It's the Epic of Gilgamesh. I don't know if anybody has heard of this. 4,000 years old, based in Uruk, which is now modern-day Iraq. And it's the story of a half-god, half-man individual who lived at that time. And he was so powerful that he was able to terrorize the residents of this particular place in Mesopotamia. So strong was he that he was able to do one thing which destroyed the confidence of the community. Before every virgin was married, he had the right to sleep with that virgin. And so there was this whole huge outcry. The people cried out to the goddess and said, remove this terror from our land. Now, what the goddess did was not to destroy this particular individual, but create another individual that had the same power. And so it was that balance of power that then created the sense that you could challenge authority that was oppressive to the people. And in a way, it says a lot about what the rule of law is all about. And the rule of law ensures that we continue to move from fear to hope. Now, why is that important? It's important because everything that democracy entails requires us to have a platform where we can each express what it is that we want to do or what we want to become. And when you look at what's happening here in Denmark, it's very interesting that your Folkemøde is an event which brings together so many different interests. The diversity of ideas and ambitions and interest is culminated in an event which to me demonstrates democracy in action. But commitment to democracy requires leadership, and leadership must be founded on a sound education system. So I would really sum up democracy by saying it's a platform for divergent views to be expressed and to be actively encouraged, no matter what those views are or how diverse they may be. If we look at Zambia and Denmark, because we are looking at, old and new democracies. You've had 150 years. We are just celebrating, as a country, 50 years of independence. We'll be celebrating that in October. We achieved our independence in 1964. Now, Zambia is a very interesting country. It's surrounded by 8 neighboring countries. It is the first country within Southern Africa that was able to obtain its independence, and it has supported liberation movements right throughout the Southern African region. Zambia is a country that has roughly 14 million people. We've not had a very good record in terms of our democratic credentials recently, but over the years, we were the first country that was able to change from a one-party state to a multi-party democracy through the ballot box rather than the bullet. And we are the first country in Africa to have transitioned from one regime to an opposition regime without any bloodshed. And so that has cemented the democratic credentials of our country. However, democracy involves a sense of tolerance, a sense of acceptance of divergence, a sense of unity around the principle of always allowing people to have the ability to articulate whatever issue they are most concerned about. And I think this is really where we need to learn quite a lot of lessons when we look at countries like Denmark and what you've been able to achieve. And especially when you look at the situation that we are able to experience through an event like Folkemøde. And I want to suggest 3 things, if I may, that perhaps you can consider as Danes in how you broaden and deepen the democratic experience both within Denmark and as an example to other countries around the world that are looking to your example. And I think that the first is, if you look at what you're able to achieve through a Swedish concept which you've embraced as your very own, there is a sense in which the lowering of the barriers that allow for the communication between your politicians and leaders and ordinary individuals is something that must go beyond one event during the course of the year, but something that you carry as a spirit that inspires and encourages people to believe that they can access, right throughout the year, the access to the individuals who are making policy decisions that affect their lives. So there's a sense in which the spirit of Bornholm should really permeate the interactions between your politicians and ordinary citizens and business right throughout the year, not just at an event like this. I think there's also a sense in which one can promote what this kind of event can achieve in other communities. In the same way that Denmark was able to incorporate and adopt an idea founded in Sweden, there is a sense in which this needs to be extended to other countries to be able to experience what it is that Denmark is able to showcase through an event like this. As I look around, I was able to count all the black people that I can see. Today I saw 2. I saw 1 actually. Yesterday I saw 3, and I think that this is democracy in action. It doesn't matter what theories you give about what democracy is all about. When they visit an event like this and they see it in action, instinctively they understand that this is what they are also aspiring to achieve within their own communities. There is one final thing that I'd like to really throw out, and that is, we as a country are currently going through a major constitution review exercise. Now I know that the Danish constitution has stood the test of time, and you need to be commended for that. However, there is one issue. I was speaking with Marianne Jensen yesterday. We had a very interesting discussion, and I asked him one question. I said, when is the next election? He smiled, and so did the people around me, and they said, that's a very good question. We don't know. And they say, it's the one prerogative that is still given to the Prime Minister of Denmark. Now, in our constitution, one of the things that we have been insisting on is to prevent an incumbent government from taking advantage of a privileged position. We want to set a date for when the next election will take place. Now, I throw this out as part of the dialogue because it seems to me that most Danes don't mind that a prime minister can decide, I'm not going to call an election because the economy is not doing so well. But as it starts to pick up, and maybe as other parties are going through difficulties, I might quickly call a snap election. Now, this, in a way, does impact what we would consider to be a level playing field. So I throw it out as a suggestion, as part of promoting the idea of what democracy stands for. Dialogue, debate, divergence, and differences. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much, Elias, for your remarks. Remember, though, that we have a 4-year period of election. So it's true that the Prime Minister have the ability to decide on a date within 4 years. But there is a 4-year period after which elections have to take place. So I accept, of course, that in those terms it's an odd situation that a sitting Prime Minister can in fact use the situation of an opposition in disarray to call a snap election and by then win an election. But as you say, we've got used to it, and as government and opposition interchanges normally every 10 years, you know, one and the other have nothing to ask of the other. So this is an opportunity as well to ask questions of Elias about his remarks, about Zambia, if anyone should like to do so. You can ask those questions obviously in Danish as well. Please.
When you counted the black people, did you also count the black sheep?
Did you get that?
Yes, I got
Lots
that.
of black sheeps around, huh? Somebody there who's just got out of... yes, indeed. Very good. Any further questions? If so, I'll give you the microphone. Yes, please.
Hello. Hello, my name is Johan, and thank you so much for coming to Denmark. Today and the other couple of days I've been walking around, and there's been a lot of talk, and I don't know if it's Denmark trying to position themselves as, you know, this high democratic leader of the world, and they keep talking about development, and we need to develop all the countries that are not as developed as us, and so on and so on and so on, which I find slightly provocative but also quite an interesting debate. And as an anthropologist, I'm studying a lot of development studies at the moment, and one of the things that we were talking about today with the foreign minister and the general secretary in Denmark of Amnesty International was that we should post more money into, particularly Africa, more money into development projects, which should be led by international NGOs and should be monitored by the government that posts money into this. Now, I've recently read that in a lot of, not Zambia, but particularly in Ghana, there's a classic example of American and European development agency who come in there and decides to do a lot of development from paradigms which are exclusively Western and Danish and English and American, and constantly fail because they fail to include the local aspect in understanding not only the cultural challenges but also the institutional challenges, and think that they can just change everything within a kind of ethnocentric bias. And I wonder if you have any thoughts on how we should approach this dialogue.
Thank you for that. Elias?
That's an absolutely critical question. I have just been taking part in a debate at Bornefonden. Is it? Yes, I don't know if I pronounced that correctly. Bornefonden. Now, earlier we attended, this was the one-on-one debate that I was just taking part in, but earlier they had a panel debate and they were talking about Africa. And everywhere I've gone today, I've generally been sort of seeing ideas around Africa and what needs to be done. And if you go to the stand of the agricultural community, I think there's the Association of Farmers, they've got a big statement there talking about how Africa is the solution to the hunger that's there in the world. I'll give you the example of what's happening in Zambia. Zambia it's 752,000 square kilometers, so slightly larger than Denmark. It has roughly 450,000 square kilometers of medium to high quality arable land. The land can yield 4 times what South African soils can yield. But only 60,000 square kilometers are currently under cultivation. Huge untapped potential. But what's happening? It's ideas that are being promoted and propagated that don't involve the local community. And this has been the development model. And I'm surprised that I still keep hearing that same approach. And then we wonder why it is that we're not seeing sustainable development in Africa. So the reason I mentioned the debate earlier was that every single person on that panel was Danish. Not a single African was there. Nor did they seek to find out, well, what is it that the Africans would like? And I want to give you one simple example, because it doesn't have to be very elaborate or expensive approaches that one takes towards resolving development challenges in African communities. And this is a fascinating example, and it shows how you can work with Western research and technology and capabilities in order to produce a result that addresses a major problem within the African communities. And this is the human-animal conflict in areas where you have a lot of elephant activity, usually near major water sources, and you have a difficulty of the people who can farm the land being able to do that effectively. Now, I've been to these areas. I've attended a funeral where we're having to step over elephant dung. And what they told me is that they always need to keep somebody on the lookout, because while you're burying that person, you could get an elephant attack, and so you all have to scatter. And remember, an elephant does run faster than, you know, your average human being. So what was the solution? Somebody within the United Kingdom had done some research. They discovered that the African elephant is actually very much afraid of the aggressive African bee. To the extent that when an elephant herd discovers that there's some bees in an area, it sends out a low hum and warns other elephant communities not to stray in that area. So what they've done is they've designed a system where they put hives all around the community and protect the land. The elephants don't go anywhere near that. Now, not only have you solved the problem of the human-animal conflict in a way that doesn't lead you to have to kill the elephants or suffer a loss of life, you've solved the hunger problem because they can now till their fields. But you've also created an income-generating opportunity through wild organic honey, which can be exported to Western countries that are looking for this kind of thing. So what have we seen there? It's Western research using African resources and capabilities to resolve a multiple series of challenges. And this is the kind of dialogue, and it required dialogue at the level of the community themselves, because other ideas had been, you set up electric fences. Now, the cost of that, the materials, all of these things were going to be imported. That is not the long-term solution. And it's this kind of approach that I'm sure even you as an anthropologist will realize somehow addresses a sustainable way forward and isn't the patronizing approach that we constantly tend to see.
Very good. Just one remark of what you said. It's important for us in the Danish Liberal Democracy Program that we do not lecture our partners about what they should do. We are proposing our efforts and our financial resources to help them with what they find needed. So we don't come to you and tell you what to do. You come to us and tell us what you think you would like us to do. And that's an important point which I should like to stress on. Any further questions? You're more than welcome. Yes, please. Get the microphone.
Well, it's not only Europe and America who's interested in Africa, it's also China. And they offer another model for prosperity, but without democracy. How do you look on the increasing the Chinese influence in Africa and in Zambia?
Okay, this is a very, very important question. I want to tell you just a short little story. It's based on a book written by a lady called Deborah Brautigam. And she's written a book called The Dragon's Gift, The Real Story of China in Africa. And when she was promoting her book, she would ask the audience one question. She'd say, I'm thinking of two countries. One is a big country that has huge resources, and the other is, but it has no skills to develop those resources. The other is a big Asian country that needs those resources. And then she asked the question, which two countries could I be thinking about? So people put up their hands quickly, and of course, they say China is one of them. She says, yes, China is one. And then she says, which is the other country? And they give many examples, Somalia, Zambia, Nigeria. And then she says, no, the other country is actually Japan. In 1979, when China was coming out of the Cultural Revolution, it had huge turmoil. It had no skills, but it had all these resources, copper, it had iron ore, it had oil. Japan needed those things to rapidly industrialize. And so what they did was they went to China and said, we want your resources, we will build all of your infrastructure in exchange. And they did it by giving them a loan on commercial terms. The Chinese said, we take the deal on one condition. We want, within 10 to 15 years, to have the ability to do these things for ourselves. And so, the Japanese universities were filled with Chinese students that were learning everything they needed to develop their own infrastructure. And they soon weaned themselves off the dependence on China. Now, China, and this is her argument, is offering exactly the same deal to every country that it interacts with. The problem is never the Chinese. The problem is always the governments themselves that determine how that investment will be carried out within those communities. And this is, it highlights one critical issue, capacity. Do we have the right capacity to be able to project what our own strategic interests should be and how we are going to engage with communities? And it's that lack of capacity which leads to the distorted relationships. And so the answer to how you fix this, because the Chinese are there, but they're doing what the governments in Africa are allowing them to do, rather than doing what perhaps, if they had better capacity, they would do to ensure a more sustainable response to the development challenges that are there. So I think really it comes back to the central point, and why we are doing work with DLDP is it's about a capacity building exercise. We want to be in a position to find the solutions for ourselves, to be able to create a sustainable development path for ourselves.
Very good. Thank you very much. Time for a last question, if anybody has such a thing. Yes, please.
You mentioned that the country has a lot of arable land that isn't cultivated. Why not?
Okay. Africa has many crises. Poverty, disease, poor infrastructure. But there really is only one crisis that we could consider to be the greatest crisis in Africa. And that's the absence of quality leadership at all levels of society. That's it. We fix the leadership problem, we fix Africa's challenges. And the reason why it is that we have 450,000 square kilometers of medium to high quality arable land, we have 40% of the water resource within the Southern African region, we have abundant minerals and capability to effectively lift many out of poverty is a function of lack of quality leadership, not just at the political level. Now, how do we fix that? Ultimately, it's about educating our communities and empowering them with something that cannot be taken away from them, and that's the ability to solve their own problems. And there's a way. The technology is available today, that will enable us to do that. And I think that the solution is very simple, but I'm not yet in politics, and that's why I'm fighting to get into power. It's a computer tablet. It's able to be uploaded with the entire school curriculum. It can reach the remotest communities in our country. And the story that I like to tell is a story of a little girl in a little village out in the western province which gets cut off during the rainy season. It's as remote as it gets. You have long drop toilets, so pit latrines. There's no access to electricity. Only 3% of the rural population have access to electricity, and 60% of the population, so 8 million people, live in these rural communities. But the day that they introduced these little computer tablets, which are no bigger than this, with its preloaded tuition on there, all the grades, and in the local language as well, 8 local languages, and it's got the teacher training in there. We have 8,800 primary and secondary schools. 3,500 of those are run by untrained teachers, and you need exercise books, which you don't have. You don't have the classrooms. That little tablet is the solution. So there's a day when she fell ill, this little girl. She had malaria. She couldn't go to school. She insisted when her friends were going to school that they take her along because she didn't want to miss her turn on that little computer tablet. This is the key. The technology is available. We don't need the electricity. It runs on solar power, lasts for 9 hours on the batteries. It also has information that teaches life skills, so that when the kids have finished using this, it teaches the mothers how to manage maternal health care. It teaches the farmers and the fathers how to plant their crops, what not to do, what to do and when. It's a community tool which doesn't require us to build costly infrastructure, because a lot of the money that supports the education sector is going towards building buildings rather than providing quality education. It avoids the need for textbooks. So all in all, the solutions are there. Why aren't they being implemented? It's all about leadership, and that's why I am in politics.
Thank you very much. Your last remarks are so true. It's about leadership, and that's why we are so pleased that we have you as partner, because I'm sure that the leadership you will be able to provide when you get elected is a leadership which will be able to take your country to the next level. So thank you very much, Elias, and thank you to all of you for coming around. Thank you. Jeg skal huske at tilføje en tak til LOF, Liberalt Oplysningsforbund, fordi de har givet os lov til at være her i dag her i teltet. Og jeg siger tak til alle jer, der tog jer tid til at høre på. Tak.